Hey everybody, my name is Gabe, and this is If I Hated You, You Would Know. Alright, so let's be super honest. This YouTube channel has been kind of a big nothing burger of weirdness and just me posting things. And I always have in the back of my head, like, I want to do something different with this, right? Originally, it started out as like scripted, long form, like deep dives into like different things that I found interesting. But the way my brain works, like, that becomes very difficult, and I get way too deep into research and think about purchasing $300 books so that I can write a 40-minute video on Greek weird wave films, right? So like that's a problem, and it's not sustainable for me, right? Like I can't like dive so deep into everything that I just lose my way. So I stopped doing that and started doing kind of short form, like blah blah blah. This is the thing I enjoyed, and that was a lot of fun too. I had a whole gimmick to it. The channel before was called Dark and Weird, and it was its own thing, and I really enjoyed doing it. But I fell off of it, largely because I had to get a real people job. After COVID, I had become a reseller online, and then our economy started to tank like about a year and a half after that. So I stopped having the sales that I needed and started driving a cab, and that just it's like 14 hours a day to make like a living wage. So since then, a lot of things have changed. I started going back to school. Like I work somewhere different. Life has become significantly less like chaotic than it was. I had started doing like live streams of art and like just kind of doing my own thing like on YouTube. But in the long run, what ended up happening was in August of last year, I slipped and fell. I hurt my back really bad. I've had back problems my whole life. And then basically the 2 months leading up until October, I was effectively stuck in bed, really couldn't do anything, lost a lot of interest in doing even my art or reading or writing. Like all of that was difficult because it just hurt too much. And just kind of was a lump in my bed playing video games. And now that I'm the backside of that, now that it's been 3 months and I'm feeling good about my recovery. Like I've lost a lot of weight, like those kinds of things. I'm just really interested in getting back to this. If you walk around this corner, you're going to be in the video because I'm not going to edit you out because I've been trying to do this for like an hour. So, yeah, there's a fair warning.
Just wanted to get a candle.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got the candle. Again, this probably won't get edited out. So, anyway, going back to it, after 3 months of recovery, I'm doing pretty good, and I've been thinking a lot about like what I want to do with this channel. Right, like it's got a couple thousand followers, and like I assume that a lot of people are going to stop following once they see these videos that I start making. Like, not because they're bad or anything, but I just think the interest in what I was doing before is slightly different than the interest of what I'm doing now. So, like, I have another video that's kind of like this. That's like, let's try something different. But it was very half-assed. I didn't really think about it very much. Whereas this, I've definitely put a lot more thought into what I'm going to do. So, with all of that backstory preamble said, I am, in fact, a child of the 90s. I'm 47 years old. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. The Satanic Panic was pretty integral to how I was raised. Raised in I want to say like a semi-fundamentalist family. My dad is Catholic. My mom was Protestant, but Protestant in the sense that she just like moved from church to church. I think today a lot of people would think of her as like an evangelical, but like my mom's belief system was very much her own because she was definitely on the autism spectrum. So she would like create effectively her own mythologies, which in reality is all religion is, anyways. So, so I was raised in kind of like a weird spot, and like as most children of the 80s and 90s, like I was effectively neglected. Like I don't hold it against my parents. It's just that they were doing their shit and they didn't care what I was doing. In comparison, like I feel like I raised my kids that way, but in comparison to my parents, I'm almost like a helicopter parent. Like I know where they're at and things like that. So, all of that is to kind of say, as I'm doing this, I have a framework in mind that comes from that time in my life. In the 90s, especially the late 90s, as I got into high school, I was in a Christian punk band, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but when you're 17 and impressionable, like stupid shit makes sense sometimes. I was very proud of what I believed in and the way I was living my life. And I think in a lot of ways, the ideals that I was raised with have not changed very much. It's that the institution has drastically changed underneath me. If you hear a cat in the background, that is my cat, one of four. So, yeah, with that in mind, being in a Christian punk band, there was like kind of like like when you think of a shadow parliament, right? Like a parliament that is the like the opposition, right? And it like meets and plans and schemes like but separate from like the other part of it, right? Like you know, I don't know how familiar you are with like parliamentarian politics and stuff, but like this idea of like a shadow side of things, right? Where it mirrors it, but it's the opposite, right? So um within the Christian punk community, there were all the trappings of like the regular punk community, right? You know, we wore the same style of clothes, we wore band shirts, we, you know, we a lot of us drank too much, you know. There was you know the same styles of music and fashion and things like that, just with a very significantly different message than you know what you were getting from Bad Religion or Crass or you know any good punk band, right? So I mean, not that there's not good Christian punk bands. It's just that the messaging is a little weird for me nowadays. But there were zines in those communities, right? Like we had tons and tons of zines. Like all through high school, I used to make one that was called "Christ Loves the Underground" (CLU). I was very proud of it. I still have copies of it. You know, like in the early 2000s, I made one called "The Punk Parent," which, when I read it now, is like the most cringy bullshit I've ever written in my whole life, including like my high school poetry, which is beyond cringy. Um, but I love the format, right? Like this idea that we're just going to sit down, we're going to make our own thing, we're going to talk about whatever we want, we're going to do whatever we want, we're going to cut and paste and screw and chop to use a to use a more modern colloquialism. Everything that we do, right? We're going to create from things that are already created. We're going to do, you know, we're going to do using the things we have around us. This DIY ethos, this like, you know the same way that the Dadists would like really embrace the popular culture that was around them to like make commentary on the culture that was around them, right? So we were doing that. Like we understood the format of zines, even though like our brains were like overlaying like a Judeo-Christian like worldview onto everything that we were writing. That doesn't mean we weren't making them, right? And then since then, I've done tons of other zines. Like I've made my own things. You know, I've worked on a few very recently. I'm about halfway through the second one, but they're just like breakdowns of like different musicians and bands. So like the first one was about Genesis Peorage and Throbbing Gristle and Psychic Youth and all that stuff. And the one I'm working on right now is a lot about it's about Crass, but it's more about Guy Voucher and like Guy's art and stuff like that. And you know, I'm sure that shit we'll talk about on other episodes. So that's where we're getting to like the crux of this, right? This like actual preamble is building to something. I know I've talked for, you know, 8.5 minutes already, but we're getting there. So the zine format is what this is going to be, right? This idea that I'm just going to say the things that I want to talk about. I will say things incorrectly. I will be wrong about things. I am more interested in the conversation than in being right. Okay? Like, I'm not out here telling you how to think. I'm not out here expressing to you some superiority of intellect, some superiority of knowledge. Like, there might be situations where somebody says something like out of pocket in a comment, and I'm like, you know, actually, no. But I will do my best to like defend everything that I say on this, you know, in these episodes or in comments or whatever with citation and facts and things like that. So that's very important to me. Like I work in research right now. Like I work, you know, in history, and like so knowing that the thing that I'm saying isn't just something that I made up is very very important to me. But there will definitely be times where some of the things I say are just fucking made up. When I do that, tell me. When something's wrong, tell me. I'm about that. This is not about fighting anybody. I don't care what side of the spectrum politically you're on. Like, it just doesn't really matter to me that much. Like, at this point, like, everything is so just an absolute cluster that I don't really care, right? Like, if you come to me with a good idea or a correction in a misstatement, then not a correction in opinion, though, mind you. Like, if I have an opinion about something, that's my opinion. Like, tough shit. Like, if I have made a factually incorrect statement, that's very different, right? But that's the format of this, right? This idea of like a zine, let's create this thing even together. Like, if you guys are interested in like participating in a project, right? Feel free to reach out. If you want to talk about something that you're passionate about, I'd love to interview you. I've done a ton of that. And the next thing that I'm going to post in this channel is actually an interview that I did with my friend David Herrera. That's about recovery. And I mean, it's mostly about recovery and like in a really positive, cool way. So that one will probably be almost entirely audio only because as I was doing it, like my camera kept turning itself off, which it did today too. And that's when I realized that I can't keep it in 4K all the time or it overheats and turns itself off. So neither here nor there, but that one will be audio only. Look forward to it. I'll probably call it issue 2. So, yeah, with that said, let's dive into the episode. So, really, the first thing I want to talk about is like more of a broad idea than anything specific. And I will talk about some specific things. I'm going to talk about a book and a band after this. So, but I'll leave it suspenseful. I'll put the little things in there, though, so that you can, skip forward if you want to not hear me rant. So, I'm on Reddit, whatever. I don't really do any other social medias besides YouTube and Reddit. I appreciate Reddit because it allows for like more of a long form conversation, and like sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. It's neither here nor there, right? It's the internet. People are gonna say out of pocket shit. People are gonna say dumb things. People are gonna argue with you for the sake of arguing with you. Like in a lot of ways, that's kind of what I'm doing. Like I just want people to like think about things, and I want to hear what they think about things. Right? It's discussion. I love discussion. One of my favorite things in the world is to just sit down with some friends and talk about something that's interesting, right? And hopefully this feels kind of like that because the reality is I want to have these conversations, and in the future maybe I'll be having these conversations with other people with me, or like over Zoom or whatever. I don't know. But I got into the our socialism, and I started talking. Somebody had posted a video of a lady talking about how anarchism has failed for XYZ reasons. Marxism has failed for XYZ reasons. Why aren't we looking to the governance of indigenous cultures to like create frameworks for a new political structure? Right? Pretty basic. A lot of people were just piling onto her. How dare you? This is so stupid. Somebody doesn't understand Marxism. Somebody doesn't understand anarchism. There's no real action points in here, et cetera, et cetera. And a big part of that is because it was a short. It's like a 2-minute, 39-second video. She's not going to go into like her understanding of Marxism, anarchism, and indigenous governance in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That's just not how reality works, right? Like, sorry, tough shit, right? So I commented. I fairly recently read David Graeber's The Dawn of Everything, and there's a lot of historical research within the book that talks extensively about how a lot of the philosophical writing that comes out of the Enlightenment, guys like Spinoza and stuff like that, that our Constitution is based on, that the French Revolution is based on, like this philosophical movement happens directly after the European incursion into South America because of the encounters that those Europeans were having with indigenous governance, right? So they're writing about these people that are very intelligent, that have this very different like schema for like how they organize themselves like as a state, which they weren't even really states, which is something Graeber also deals with in the book. Here, stay right there. I'll probably edit this tiny portion out, but I'm going to go grab the book so you can see it. probably should also acknowledge that it's not just David Graeber. It's David Graeber and David Wengrow. And a big part of why I just say David Graeber is because it's at the top, and my brain doesn't always like make all the connections. But The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow. Anyway, so going back to it, these philosophical movements that created the Enlightenment, that created, the French, the French Revolution, this ideal of, like socialism and, what eventually became Marxism and the things that we call anarchism, and democracy. All of those ideas are ideas that were supplanted from the Western Hemisphere back to Europe, then churned through philosophy and turned into the Enlightenment, right? That's what they're speculating. And I mentioned that. And the response was super negative. I got called a Fed. That was fun. I got called, I got called low intelligence and all these other things. And, that sucks. Nobody likes that feeling. Nobody wants to be made fun of on the internet. But I think the thing that I really took the most umbrage to was that the vast majority of them, not vast majority, there was really only 3 people I was talking with. So I shouldn't over exaggerate. I shouldn't be hyperbolic about this, because it really is just like a conversation on Reddit that I was trying to engage with. And that's what I wanted to do. Right. But I can't engage in a conversation if it's just ad hominem attacks, right? Tell me why I'm wrong, right? Tell me what I've done wrong or said wrong, and I did respond sarcastically by jokingly saying sorry about my wrong thing, and then the first commenter got very upset with me. So, but I tried to delineate what I was thinking, what I was talking about. And the response became, through several different people and several different conversations, that within, this thread, which is fine, it's its own place. Our socialism is its own thing. It can have its own ideals, its own rules, its own conversations. But all the responses I was getting, because I had said there are no successful Marxist states, because I personally don't believe that there are, because the states that are successful, like Laos and Vietnam and China, are not, they are Marxist states in the sense that they are run in a communist fashion. They do redistribute wealth to some extent, but in the long run, all 3 of those countries, and most countries that are fully Marxist, are sliding, decade by decade into capitalist states, right? And the example I gave was that the CEO of BYD, which is a giant EV company, they make cars and stuff. They're starting to ship them to Canada now. The only reason we don't really get them here is because China, because China bad. So, but the CEO of BYD, he makes $1.7 million a year. In CEO pay, not a shitload, right? That's not Jeff Bezos. That's not Mark Zuckerberg. That's not whatever. But that's also not my point. My point is that the factory worker, the guys actually on the floor making the cars, make $2,000 a month, right? So you extrapolate that, that's, $24,000 a year versus the CEO making $1.7 million a year, right? That is the definition of capitalism, and that is directly antithetical to Marxism, right? So how can you say that China is a Marxist state, right? And so trying to have that discussion, the only response I was getting is that the only path forward now is Marxism. These 2 or 3 people. The only way we can go ahead is Marxism. This kind of dogmatism, right? This kind of latching on to absolutely let's get biblical, the chapter and verse of the manifesto or Das Kapital or whatever, right? This insistence that this is the only way, is exactly how we get to where we're at today, right? This non-compromise, this non-cooperation, this non-listening mode set that we have, where we create the outgroup and we say anything this outgroup says is invalid because it's not what I believe. I mean, come on, you're trying to tell me that different socialist nations are doing it wrong when they're doing it in a way that makes the citizenry happier and more secure? You're going to tell me that there's not countries that are more successful outside of the framework of socialism? I mean, it's hard to argue that any nation's doing it perfect. I would say it's impossible to argue that. But I would also say that there's places doing it a lot better than places that say they're directly Marxist, right? This is not to deny the struggle, right? The blood, the sweat, the effort, the violence that has gone into establishing these states, right? Like, that cannot be overlooked. That effort, that fight for the working class, for people, is very important and cannot be glossed over. But we have to recognize when our plan didn't work. I'm not a Marxist. That's fine. I'm not really a communist. If anything, I would consider myself what Noam Chomsky calls a libertarian socialist, which is this anti-state, anti-capitalist like mentality. I don't think it's ever been tried in a nation-size experiment. Don't know that it would work. Have a lot of opinions about the size of countries and those kinds of ideas. And even just the importance of borders, what does rule of law look like if, you have autonomous municipality? Like, I think about this kind of stuff a lot, which is weird, I know, but it's true. And the reality is that there's a lot of ideas that I have that I think are great, that I don't know if they would work because they haven't been tried. But I don't assume that somebody else's idea is not going to work because I haven't tried that either, right? This notion that the things that we have tried that have not done what we wanted them to do, right? So, like, the ideal of Marxist thought is that the proletariat takes over the means of production through centralized, like, power, right? Like, they grab it, then they redistribute it, and then they let go of the centralization. That's my understanding of it. And I may be very wrong, and please let me know if I'm wrong. But my understanding of it is that, but people in power hold on to power. It's something that we are psychologically built to do in a lot of ways. And so we have to look past what hasn't worked, see the aspects of things that do work, and then move forward. And the forward isn't going to be called Marxism. It's not going to be called libertarian socialism. It's not going to be called indigenous governance or anarchism. It's going to become whatever it is. Something new, something we haven't created yet, right? Like, the Industrial Revolution wasn't called the Industrial Revolution 20 years before it happened, right? It was called that because something different had happened. Something new had happened. And we needed a way to describe it. What comes next after, after the U.S. burns or Europe, consolidates, or Russia balkanizes, or, China invades Taiwan, whatever happens next will be something new. That's how it works. And we have to figure that out. So to dogmatically just like shit on somebody because they have a different opinion of you and genuinely want to know what you think, as opposed to be attacked for asking what you think, that dogmatism is going to destroy every grassroots revolutionary movement around the world. In the States, in Europe, in Asia, in the global south, anywhere you go, if you can't figure out how to work with the person you disagree with, you will fail. Like, that's how life works. Disagreement is one thing. Like, active harm is something different, right? Like, I can disagree with the policy of deportation. I can disagree with that. Unfortunately, when you've stepped outside of the social contract and started just murdering people, we can't come together, right? Like, there's not a compromise point, because you have now like violated my humanity. It has nothing to do with laws or civil rights, right? Like, having an opinion might hurt your feelings. Right? I got again on Reddit. I spent too much time on Reddit yesterday. I had a comment deleted for being ableist because I said the word idiot. Right? Fair. Right? Like, I'm a 47-year-old man. I think of the word idiot, and I don't think about the etymology of it. I don't think about where it came from. I don't think about where it, what it means. I think about the fact that if you say something dumb, I say, oh man, don't be an idiot. Right? Or the colloquial, that's so gay. Right? Those aren't excuses. They're reasons, right? And it might hurt your feelings. It might bother you. And if you correct me, like, as a human, because I'm not a piece of shit, I will correct myself and apologize. It's the way it should work when you offend someone, right? But if I hit you with a bat because you're gay, you've violated my humanity. It has nothing to do with rights. You've just denied the fact that I deserve to be a person, right? If I hit you, in the face because you're a dirty pinko commie, I have violated your humanity. Nobody's opinion deserves to be, stopped through violence, unless you start the violence. Like, it's the thing we've all learned. Don't start none, won't be none. Like, don't be the one to swing first. What my dad used to always say: don't start the fight, finish it. Right? That kind of thing. So let's just, try to chill with the dogmatism. I don't know. It's just me. And if you agree, great. If you don't, great. Let's have that conversation in the comments. All right. Let's go on to the next thing. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is a book. I love books. I love reading. I'm probably going to talk about books quite a bit on here. And just media in general. Like, I'm a big fan of all, pretty much all forms of media, but especially like nonfiction, trash, just garbage shit, graphic novels. I like bad movies, good books, and hard music. Oh man, that was pretty good. That was off the dome. Anyway, I'm very proud of that moment. But today I'm going to talk about this episode. I'm going to talk about the Shadow Gospel, how anti-liberal demonology possessed U.S. religion, media, and politics by Whitney Phillips and Mark Brockway. Here's that book. All right. So this book is really interesting. There's been a few books like this that have come out in the last few years, but I think this one is probably the most well cited and probably most digestible. So, like, as I flip through this book, let's see. The book is 204 pages long, and this last 100 pages is just citations. And, like, very little of it is, like, end note kind of citations, where it's, like, explaining something or describing something. Almost all of it is just, like, direct citation. Like, this is where you find the thing that we quoted. The book really delineates this trajectory from, kind of the 60s and 70s, and, like, this movement to, like, fuse the evangelical Christian movement with the, the conservative, in most cases Republican, but, like, in general conservative, like, political voices, right? And as time goes on, like, those two groups begin to, like, merge closer and closer together. We have guys like Jerry Falwell and Billy Graham and Tim LaHaye and those guys that are just, like, really espousing rhetoric that is significantly more reminiscent of conservative political thought than any kind of like biblical philosophy, right? So as that goes forward, what this book talks about is like this very specific movement away from um, kind of Christianity as religion into, effectively MAGA as religion, right? And I think one of the most profound things that the book says is that like this system has created like a religion outside of religion that has done this really kind of sad thing to the biblical story, right? So like in the gospel, like it, and I'm not talking about the books after, Jesus is talking, right? So in the gospels, Jesus talks about how he's going to come again, right? And there's references to, judging the living and the dead and like the return of Christ and those things throughout, the New Testament. But Jesus specifically talks about like, I will come back again. Oh man, that's probably going to be a big bump, right? And that, for my whole life, has been the most important part of the Christian tradition, right? This idea that someday Jesus will come back and that we need to, as a people, be prepared for that, right? Instead, this new kind of religion without a religion, as it terms it, has removed this idea of Jesus coming back, de-emphasizes almost completely, and emphasized coming apocalypse, right? Like the Tim LaHaye, the Left Behind, the A Distant Thunder. If you ever got to see that great, terrible movie in your church rec room. But this idea that like before Jesus comes back, all this terrible shit's gonna happen. People will be raptured, explosions, mass chaos in the streets. Like we don't. Please no, we have enough as it is. And I'm sure there's people with this apocalyptic sense that the things that are happening right now are that happening, right? I don't even need to guess that. I've heard that from people. So by removing the return of Christ and like this, look busy, Jesus is coming, by taking away that and replacing it with look busy, the apocalypse is coming, be prepared to stand up for your family. They've created a dynamic where like this apocalyptic thought becomes the religion and not Christian philosophy, right? Because the things that are in the Bible, like, yes, there are, a panoply of horrible things in the Bible and terrible shit that is said from beginning to end, and stories that would absolutely like make your toes just curl up with ugh, right? Like there are so many biblical stories that are fully the ick, right? So like I'm not going to deny that for a second, but like the overarching philosophy of the Christ figure in the Bible really has a lot to do with like service to your fellow man, right? Like this idea of like secular humanism that arose like kind of in the aftermath of World War II is like a very it's a very broken down, stripped down version of the same philosophy minus mysticism, right? So like if you want to have a good conceptualization of like the core philosophical tenets of Christianity, looking at secular humanism will teach you the same thing, right? So this book is talking about all of that, and we're seeing like kind of that manifesting itself in our day-to-day lives, right? Like these Christian pastors that are going out there, telling people that Donald Trump is Jesus. Like I've heard that direct quote before. It would take me forever to find the video, but if somebody is really, really pressed about it, I will go find it. There's these notions that there was just an article released where Stephen Miller insisted that they refer to Trump as the superhuman president. Like he's so astonishingly healthy, all this other stuff, like creating like this Messiah figure out of like a human being in deference to like actual biblical tradition. Like, and this book talks about the build up to that. Really interesting encounter one of my friends had online. He had posted, I bought the book for him, and he had posted that he was reading it. And the book was released a couple weeks after Charlie Kirk was shot, right? And so a guy gets on my friend's Facebook and says, "Did you know that they timed the release for this to shame Charlie Kirk and his assassination?" And all I could think was, man, there are 100 pages of citations in this book. Do you really think somebody can do 100 pages of citations, like understanding that most of that means that the research is probably at the very minimum 2 to 3 pages each, like that you're reading in 2 weeks? Somebody doesn't know how books are made. So stuff like that cracks me up. But I hope, it's the kind of book that I think will be very important going forward, right? Like when I went back and talked about dogmatism, like going back and talking, thinking about me talking about dogmatism, I think books like this are going to really show us like a lot of the failure points of like systems, right? Like we can see like by going back into history where the issues start and how they happen. And, hopefully as we continue as humans, we get better at it. And we have, right? Like, this time period is fucking awful. Like, there is absolutely no denying it. Like, the administration in the United States is literally just like attacking everybody. I am shocked that ICE agents haven't just been like AK-47. I'm genuinely shocked. I think a big part of that is probably because they're not really, attacking criminals, right? Like they're not going against gangs, right? Like we're seeing videos of them in suburbs, not, projects. Like, yeah, they're grabbing the low-hanging fruit. Like they're attacking people that won't attack back. I mean, it is what it is. I've seen reports that they might go to Philadelphia, and all I can think of is they burn their city down when they win. So, like, good luck with that. I don't know what to tell you. But, yeah, I got distracted. Going back, Shadow Gospel. Please check it out. It's by Whitney, Phillips, and Mark Brockway. I'm actually probably going to try to reach out to him and see if I can interview him, see how that goes. I've never really done that before. I've done lots of interviews in the past, but they were all set up by somebody else who's good at that sort of thing. So, all right. Well, let's move on to the last part of the zine. So, I see on Reddit in r/punk the same post like 10 times a week. I'm new to punk rock. Tell me some bands. Right? Or who's speaking out against the administration right now? Or what bands are, really out there doing it? And I always have a list of things I like that I share with people, I listen to like quite a wide range of music, but my heart is in hard music, punk, metal, fast, aggressive, largely politically motivated. That sort of thing is my jam, right? So most of the time when I talk about music on here, it'll be that. But I got a text message from somebody that was like, "Hey, have you seen XCOM?" My immediate thought was, yeah, that game is hard. My second thought was I should probably click on this link to see what he's actually talking about. And that link led to a video of a song called Fake ID. Let's check out a little tiny bit of it right now. Okay, so like, look, that's the energy, right? That's it. This is the thing that like made me love punk, right? Like I remember the first time I heard Gallows sing Orchestra of Wolves. I was like, God damn, that is it, right? XCOM gave me that exact same feeling. Punk's not dead. It's just, I just aged out of the pit, right? Like I go into the pit, I break, right? But these guys, let them do it. I think it's the drummer is the son of Scott Ian from Anthrax. That might be wrong. Like I said, any corrections you need to make them. But so there's this really adorable video of them. And like, I hate to say it's adorable because these guys are like pure intensity and I fucking love it. And I remember being a kid too. I was full of the way they are. That's what I was full of. Just fat. I've always been a chunky guy, but There's this really adorable video, and I don't. It's not adorable because of them. It's adorable because of Scott Ian, right? So they're backstage, they're in the huddle, getting ready to go on stage. They break the huddle, and there's Scott Ian, phone in hand, just grinning, proud as fucking Papa on the face of the earth. So I gotta respect that. Generational hard, right? Generational thrash to punk. Fuck yes, do that forever. Yeah, I love it. It's great. They only have like 4 or 5 songs, or no, 3 or 4 songs out right now. All of them are singles. You can find them YouTube, Spotify, all that crap. I always highly recommend going directly to bands' websites if you really like them, purchasing their music and purchasing their merch, because let's be real, corporations don't want to pay people. So things like Spotify and YouTube Music pay bullshit, and that's okay because they won't survive eventually. Like, I gotta believe that. I gotta believe deep down inside that capitalism will fail. Yeah, which again, opinion. Be as riled up as you want, but that belief is probably not going to change because it hasn't changed in like 35 years. So I'm not dogmatic about it. If you present to me something else, like I'm a big fan of the cooperative movement. I'm a big fan of cooperative like businesses, but that's not really capitalism. Wealth sharing is not capitalism. Anyway, so distracted. Go listen to X-Comm. It's great. I think that'll wrap it up. This has been 40 minutes of me just kind of rambling with some interspersions of other things. If you enjoy this, give it a like and a subscribe. Like, that's fine. If you hated it, like, give it a dislike, unsubscribe. I don't really care. Like, this is for me, not you. Which sounds super selfish, but that's the reality, right? Like, I want to do this because I want to do this. If you don't enjoy it, there's plenty of other YouTube. And if you want to be mad at me, that is totally fine. As long as you're presenting arguments instead of just being a dick, I will probably interact with you. So, look forward probably later this week or early next week to the second issue, which I will include an interview with David Herrera, my friend, about recovery. And I'll probably talk it'll be zine style again, but the interview will probably be at the end because it's pretty long. It's about 45 minutes long too. So until next time, just remember, my name's Gabe Giannis. I'm not a very interesting person. I just really like interesting things. And if I hated you, you would know.